To make the seam, we're going to join horizontal strands that run between the edge column of stitches and the main fabric on one knitted piece to the corresponding horizontal strands on the other knitted piece. If those strands are not easy to see, simply take the edge column of stitches and pull it away from the main fabric, making those strands more visible. Then take a piece of yarn that is at least 3 times as long as the length of the future seam and thread it into a wool needle. First, we'll attach the yarn to the work and join the pieces at the bottom. To do that, we start with the piece on the left. Insert the wool needle from the bottom up under the first horizontal strand. It's going to be the one that is right above the cast on edge. So we go over here and pull the yarn through, leaving a small tail. The tail should be long enough to weave it in later on. And then we do the same thing but with the piece on the right. So we go again into the spot that is between the cast on edge and the first horizontal strand that we plan to join with the seam. And then we do the same thing that we did in the first step and go in exactly the same spot again. When we pull the yarn, we would notice that the yarn forms kind of a digit 8. This is a very secure way to join yarn without making a knot. Now take the yarn in your hand and the tail and pull them to tighten the join. Now we are ready to seam. We're gonna go under those strands and we're gonna pick up 2 strands and go up away from the bottom on the piece on the right, and we're going to pick up 1 strand and go down towards the bottom on the piece on the left. So first we start with the piece on the right. We insert the wool needle into the spot that is right where we already worked, where we inserted the yarn already. So we go in there, then skip 2 of those horizontal strands. See, I have 2 strands over here, and pull the needle out of the work and then tighten the seam. Now we go to the corresponding strand over here. So we could either just eyeball it and move kind of perpendicular the edge, or we could count the strands and find the second one and go in there. But this time we don't go up, we go down. We go down by 1 strand, just 1, like this. And then pull the yarn and tighten the seam. When we tighten the seam, we should do it quite nicely. So pull the yarn pretty hard, not to break it of course, but pretty hard, because this seam is elastic. We don't need to make it looser just to keep the fabric from puckering. Instead, we would better make it tighter to make sure we don't have any slack between the pieces. Now we go again on the piece on the right, we go in the spot that is between those 2 strands that we picked up in the previous step, the previous time we worked with this piece. So we go top down into that spot and then up again picking up 2 strands, one of the kind of already worked strand and 1 new one. And then pull the yarn, again tightening the seam nicely. And then we go to the piece on the left. Find the strand that's already worked and go into the strand that is above that strand. And see, this time we go down. If we look at the bottom, we always go up when we work the strands over here on the piece on the right, and we always go down on the piece on the left. And that's basically it. That's what we do. We simply go in between 2 strands over here, pick a new strand, pull tight, then go down just 1 strand, pull tight, and keep going until you join all strands and the seam is finished. Once in a while, check whether the pieces are aligned. If they are misaligned, let's say like this, then adjust your seaming depending on which piece is longer. Simply pick, let's say, 3 strands at some point, or pick 2 strands and then go around the same strand over here. So just adjust the process to compensate for that difference in length between the pieces. Usually, if you have the same number of rows on both pieces, you're pretty safe. Even though my pieces don't look aligned, it only happens because the gauge is different. So I'm not gonna compensate for anything because I know they have the same number of rows. So once the seam is done, you will see that it looks very much like the seam formed by the mattress stitch on the right side. So it's hardly visible, just like this one. See, it's not easy to see where the seam is, but it forms a pretty big ridge on the wrong side, just as the mattress stitch does. But when we test the elasticity by stretching the piece, we will notice that this seam, the modified backstitch, is much more elastic. So it's basically as elastic as the fabric itself. So our sweaters and cardigans are not going to get pocket, unlike the mattress stitch, which is not elastic at all. See, it doesn't have any give at all. To test the strength of the seam, let's do a little experiment. Let's cut one of the strands that form the seam that we've just created. It's good it is in the contrasting color, so it's easy to find that strand. So once I cut it, see what happens? I do get a hole, right? It's inevitable, but the hole is contained. See, it doesn't grow any bigger. Even though I stretch the piece, it's still pretty small. But if we do the same thing to the seam that's formed by mattress stitch, let's find that piece. It's going to be somewhere over here. Then, if I pull it, see, everything is just falling apart. Not good. Not good at all. If you find this tutorial helpful, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to be notified every time I publish a new video. Happy knitting, my friend. I'll talk to you in the next tutorial.